Okay, this is lesson 2.1, which is inductive reasoning. So you're using patterns to write rules. So on this first part, these patterns that we're looking at look like tables, but the real geometry is when they look like pictures. But I'm just using tables at first to remind you of this information that hopefully you learned in Algebra 1. So the first thing I need you to do is to get your calculator. I'm going to try to make this fit on the screen. So the first thing I need you to do is hit the mode button. So the default of the calculator is to have your stat diagnostics off and your stat wizards on, and we need to flip both those. So go to Stat Diagnostics, go over to On and hit Enter. If that's already on, then you're good there. Then go down to Stat Wizards and turn those off. If you do not have Stat Wizards, then don't worry about it, they wouldn't be on. And if for some reason your calculator doesn't have Stat Diagnostics, I can show you how to do that too. But if you were able to turn it on in mode, then don't worry about this next part. Let me try to make this whole thing fit in there. So if you didn't have that, that just means your software on your calculator is a little bit older. You'll go to Second, Catalog, which is on the 0 button. And this brings up everything your calculator can do. And we want to go to Diagnostics, so you can hit the x to the -1 because that'll take you to those that start with D. And you'll just scroll down till you get to Diagnostics On. Right there, hit Enter. Enter again, it should say done. And I'll show you what that does in a little bit. All right, so this says, is this table linear or quadratic? So linear, if you'll remember, is a line. Quadratic makes a parabola. In a linear equation, you just have an x, but in quadratic, you'll have an x squared. So to see if it's linear or quadratic, first we look at the x's. You just have to make sure these change by the same amount. So since it goes up 1 each time, you're good with the x's. So then we need to see how much these change by. So from 5 to 7 is plus 2. From 7 to 9 is plus 2. From 9 to 11 is plus 2. And from 11 to 13 is, oh, I'm sorry, I wrote a 1. Plus 2. Okay, so this is called your first rate of change. It's also the slope of your line if these just change by 1. But we're going to call it the first rate of change. And if that is the same, then it is linear. So that's the first thing it asks for up here. Linear or quadratic. We're going to answer the rest of it in a second. But I want to show you this other one. So notice these all change by 1, so we're good there. So let's get the first rate of change. That's plus 3. From 4 to 9 is plus 5. From 9 to 16 is plus 7. From 16 to 25 is plus 9. So the first rate of change is not the same. When it's not, you have to do the second rate of change, which goes between these two numbers. So from 3 to 5 is plus 2. From 5 to 7, plus 2. From 7 to 9 is plus 2. So when the second rate of change is the same, then it is quadratic. Now, it is possible that neither one of them are all the same, but in this class, it will either be linear or quadratic. So it'll be either be the first rate of change is the same or the second one. But that doesn't mean that in the future you won't see examples where they're not all the same. Okay, so let's go back to the first one. So the next part says to write an equation to represent this data. So that's what we need our calculators for. Let me see if I can make this whole thing fit. That might be as small as it gets. Oh wait, I can scoop this over. There we go. Okay, so what we do is we go to Stat, Edit. And on the back of your notes, you should have all these keys that will tell you how to enter this. And really, you only need keys steps 1 and 2. 3 and 4 can help you, but they're not necessary. So we're going to go 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter, 5, enter. Those are our X's, and then our Y's are 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. So that was the very first step on the back of your notes on number 1. Then for number 2, it says to hit Stat again. Then you hit the over arrow to calc, and you're either going to hit 4 or 5. 4 is for linear and 5 is for quadratic. So since this first one is linear, let's hit 4 and enter. So this R value may be new to you. This is just like a backup so that you can check your work. If this was not 1, if R squared was not 1, that means it's not really a line. So either it's quadratic and you accidentally did linear, or you typed in one of the points wrong, which happens more. So you plug the 2 in for A and the 3 in for B. So our equation would be y equals 2x plus 3. So I'm going to write that here. So that's the equation. Now I'm going to show you steps 3 and 4 real fast just in case you want to see it. So whenever you go to Stat over to Calc and hit 4, right here we hit Enter. But if you don't hit Enter and you hit this VARS key, V-A-R-S, it's next to clear, then you scroll over to YVARS and you hit Enter 3 times. You get the same thing, but the difference is it now put that equation into y equals in the very first spot. So that could help you if you were wanting to see the table. So on the next part it says like find y when x is 100. And so part of what that says on there is that you can manipulate the table. So if we want x to be 100, you can go to second window, and this is what we want our table to start at, so we don't have to scroll. We can change it to 100. So when x is 100, y is 203. So it can help you there, but I find that many people get so confused about putting it in their YVARs that it's easier to just solve it yourself. So I'm going to pretend like we don't know how to do that and just solve it by hand. So it says find y when x is 100. So here's our equation. We want to know what y is when x is 100. So I'm going to make x be 100. So we do 2 times 100, get 200, add 3, and y would be 203, which is what our table said. Then it says to find x when y equals 23. So here's our equation. We get 23 for y. Now you actually have to solve this equation. So minus 3, you get 20 equals 2x. Then to get x by itself, you have to divide both sides by 2, and you'd get 10. Now on this one, we need to get our equation, so we'll go back to our calculator. Start over by going to Stat and hit Enter on Edit. Now, a long time ago in middle school, your teachers probably told you to clear this out to do second plus 712 and clear your calculator, but that will take away all the diagnostics that we've turned on, and it will turn the stat wizards back on. You just don't want to do that very often in high school because it would mess up your calculator too much. So it's real easy. I'm sure they could teach you this. You go up to the list, hit clear, hit enter, and the list clears. Just don't hit delete, because if your list goes away, then it won't work. You have to have L1 and L2, and if you delete L2, it'll have L1 and L3. Now you could clear both of them, but since the X's are the same, I'm going to leave them like that. So now I'm entering the second chart on your notes. So then we go back to stat, over to calc. Now we're hitting quad because it's quadratic. So you hit 5, hit enter. I'm not going to worry with putting it my y bars. So r squared is 1, that's good. Now, really this equation, let me write it, is y equals, for a I'm going to put a 1, x squared, plus, for b I'm going to put 0, and then for c I'm going to put 0. Now, you don't really have to write plus 0, and 0 times x is going to be 0, and you don't have to write that either. But normally, if these were numbers, you would write them. I've had a lot of people not write them because I don't on this one example, but I'm not writing it just because you don't need to put plus 0. And really, 1x squared is the same as just x squared, so our equation is just y equals x squared. So then it says, find y when x is 23. So here's our equation. If x is 23, looks like that. 23 squared is 529, so that is your answer. Then it says to find x when y is 100. So if this is 100, to solve that, you would take the square root of both sides, and you get 10 for x. Now that hopefully was algebra review, and you might remember some of it. The new part is this geometry, which doesn't really change how you solve the problem, it just changes what it looks like. So you will have to make your own t-chart, but it shouldn't be difficult. X is always going to be your term number. So it's like the number it is in the sequence. So this is the first picture, second picture, third picture, fourth picture. So even if it didn't have these numbers up here, you just go in order. So the first one has how many squares? 1. So that's y, because y is going to be number of squares. The second one has 3 squares. The third one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the fourth one has 10 squares. So the first thing it asks is if this is linear or quadratic. So that is plus 2, plus 3, plus 4. This is plus 1, plus 1. So they're not the same till the second time, so that is quadratic. Then it asks for that function. Ooh, sorry. So we're going to put them in our calculator. Go to stat, hit enter on edit. Now, if you just want to delete one number, like the 5, you just go on top of that number and hit delete. Delete. Just don't ever delete an entire list. So this was 1, then it was 3, then it was 6, then it was 10. So since it's quadratic, you'll hit stat, go to calc, hit 5 for quadratic, and this is what you get. Now again, c is 0, so you don't have to put that, only because it's 0. So our equation would be y equals 0.5x squared plus 0.5x. Then it says how many squares will be in the 55th term. So term numbers are x's, so you plug that in for x. So 0.5 times 55 squared plus 0.5 times 55. So put that in your calculator and see if you can get the answer on your own. And you can pause it, because I'll put the answer up here. Hopefully you get 1540. And that's all there is to it.